sit down.
Welcome once again to Toy Talk. Now this month we're going to be talking about time. Benjamin Franklin once asked, "Do you love life?" He then went on to respond, "If you do, then do not squander time, for that is the stuff that life is made of." Now, to me, this begs the question, what is squandered time? Or even more importantly, what is a way to value time? Now, honestly, I don't think there's one cookie cutter answer for this that just kind of works for everybody. Honestly, I think if you polled 100 people, you could get 100 different answers as to what someone considers valued time, what's important to somebody, and what they would consider wasted or squandered time. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about this. I did a little math about this. And we all get the same amount of time every day. We get 24 hours, as we know. That breaks down to 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. Now, an article in USA Today once said that the average American lifespan nowadays is 78.8 years. So if you round that down to 78 years, that means that all of us get 350,438,400 seconds in a lifetime. Now, the great thing about these numbers is that no matter how old you are, you've got a vast amount of time. It's been said that a life can change in a second. That means you get 86,400 chances for your life to change every single day. So everybody has a lot of time. But what we really need to do is learn how to prioritize it, learn how to figure out what's most important to us and what it is that's important and how to spend our time. Now, in the last several years in the modern world, there's been a couple of times where we've gone into focusing on time and done studies to try to improve how to use time. In the 1950s and the 1960s, we had the Industrial Revolution. And the concept behind this was that if we designed a technology to keep improving, that it would make things faster in life, we'd have more time in our lives. And what's going on is we got microwaves to be able to cook food faster. We got cars that move faster and trains and buses and all these things. We get all these things. We've got, cell phones now so we can make calls on the road. We've had typewriters get faster and faster until they became computers and tablets. But we haven't really gotten any more time from that. If anything, we've wound up with less time. And I think the reason for that is that it's so much easier to interact with people nowadays. You can have a business meeting with somebody on the other side of the world just as easily as you can with somebody sitting across the table from you. You can socialize with a person in Japan and as easily as you can with somebody in your living room. So if anything, it's taken time away. And then in the 1980s, another concept came out. Now this came out by Stephen Covey, who is best known as the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey came up with a program called the Time Management Matrix. And what this does is say, let's figure out what is important versus what is urgent. In other words, what needs to be done now versus what's important but can kind of get backburnered a little bit. Now, this is a good concept. And a lot of what it does is it tells you to make a list of, look, this needs to be done first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And actually, I do that every day. I have a list of what needs to be done, and I do have it prioritized in an order. And I would encourage anybody to do that. It does help in your life. However, the problem is it still doesn't give you any more time. And just as the end of the day comes, you still run out of time and just kind of can end up pushing things on to the next day. It's only focused on today. There's nothing focused on the future. Now, the problem I see in both of these problems is one, that you only see today and not things that'll help the future, but also that none of them look at emotions. We all are, judged and run by our emotions to an extent. There's things that get our blood going, get us excited. There's things we want to accomplish. We've talked a lot on Toy Talk about dreams and setting goals to reach our dreams. And these are things we need to prioritize and have onto our list, or we're never going to reach them. Even practically speaking, there are ways to gain time. Now, it doesn't give us more seconds or more hours or whatever, however you want to figure that out. But what you can do is, in a practical sense, there's things we can do like setting up online bill pay. Now, most people will never do this because they sit there and say, well, it's going to take a couple hours to do that, and I just don't have an extra 2 hours to sit down online and set up bill pay. But if you think about it this way, The average person probably takes about 30 minutes every month to pay their bills. So if you take that 2 hours in one day, then after about 4 months, you've now eliminated that 30 minutes from your monthly schedule. It's not a lot of time, but it does give you more. But the way I see it is we need to figure out, as we've talked about before, if we know what our dream is and we have goals to reach it, we need to prioritize in our time, in those lists that we make, the things that can eventually be erased by helping us reach our goal. Like I've said so many times about being an author, and right now I'm looking at publishers, I'm looking at literary agents, I'm looking at self-publishing, I'm looking at different avenues, and I'm taking a lot of time right now focusing on these, studying these, and figuring out the best route for the next book. But once it's out, that's eliminated. Once I get a book that's doing well, I don't necessarily have to go looking for agents again. I don't have to go looking for publishers. Things can flow, and those things are eliminated, giving me more time in a day. And it's really important to do this. You know, there are things that are not necessarily moving toward the future that need to be done, and I'm not belittling that. You need to do the things that need to be done each day, but take some time also to do things that are going to help you move toward your goals and ultimately your dreams in the future. In the 1990s, there was a movie that came out. I don't hear it talked about too often nowadays, but it was very popular at the time, and the movie was called Mr. Holland's Opus. And what this movie was a movie about a man who had a dream to create this big symphony, his magnus opus. And he got married and took a job at a high school teaching music to be able to, pay the bills, make ends meet, all good things to do to support his family. But what ends up happening is you see this go play out over approximately 30 years of his life, and he's teaching these students and he's impacting their lives. He's having a great impact on these kids. A lot of them go on to have very successful lives. We see them come back at different periods in the movie. But then it comes to the end and he's retiring. And what ends up happening is he's never been able to finish the symphony. He's never been able to just find the time to sit down and do it. Every now and again he'd sit down, spend an hour or something, and then he'd get distracted. He just couldn't get it finished. And it comes to the day of his retirement. If I remember correctly, it was his retirement. And some of his students come back and they play the symphony. They've finished it for him. And it's supposed to be this big, joyous, kind of heart-tugging moment that they finished this for him because he had impacted their lives so much. And it is a great moment. It is a heart-tugging moment. But behind that, you have to also look and see that this man never accomplished his dream. He never prioritized the time to be able to sit down and work toward his goal. Now, I understand he had other responsibilities, he had duties, and he was impacting lives. But if he had taken even 10 minutes a day, woke up 10 minutes earlier, how long would it have taken to finish that symphony? 5, 10 years? If he had even taken 30 minutes a week, just set aside this one specific time, he could have reached his dream. He could have set goals to get toward that dream. He could have prioritized his time, and it would have changed his life greatly. And, even to put it on more of a personal level, I always think about the song, The Cat in the Cradle. The cat in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. And the whole song is about a father whose son wants to spend time with him. He just wants dad to play ball, play catch, come spend time with me. And dad's always too busy from work. Whatever it is, he just doesn't have the time to spend with his son. And it's always, when you coming home, son? I don't know when. But we'll get together then. We'll have a good time then. And the song goes on, and he's never got the time for his son. And then the end of the song comes, and now the man is old, the son is grown, and the man is reversing the question and saying, son, when can we spend time together? And the son is saying, Dad, I just don't have the time. I don't know when, but we'll get together then when I have time. And he'd programmed in this child, in his subconscious, in his paradigm, throughout his childhood, that it was more important to spend time on work. And I'm not saying it isn't. To be honest, whatever it is that's important to you, to your future, whatever your dreams are what you need to be prioritizing your time to move toward. Because if you don't, you're never going to reach them. It's not necessarily that you're going to have that your goal may not be that you may not even have children. It may not be to have somebody like your child there at the end of your life. But whatever it is that you want to have, the dreams that you want to reach, the goals that you want to set to get there, you need to do that, because if you don't, you're going to come to those older years with regret, realizing I never did accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Now, to be honest, I cannot sit here and say, if you set your goals, you're going to reach your dream, 100% certain it's going to happen. I can't tell you that. There are some people that don't. But what I can tell you is that if you don't set the goals and you don't move toward your dream, that I guarantee you, 100% guaranteed, that you will never reach it. It's very important to prioritize time, so I encourage you to do that. Set out a list, prioritize what needs to be done. We'll be back in just a minute with our Toy of the Week.
Ajanta musical clocks with volume control and auto music switch off at night.
Okay, well, welcome back once again, and it's time for our Toy of the Week. Now, this toy is one that has really stood the test of time. It was originally, the patent for this toy was originally set, or this character, I should say, was set in 1915 by Johnny Gruelle, who had an idea for a book, and he went out and filed a patent. And in 1918, he wrote his first book, Raggedy Ann Stories. So we're talking about Raggedy Ann and Andy. Obviously, the book was a huge success to the extent that 2 years later, in 1920, he decided that Raggedy Ann needed a brother. He wanted to expand on the story. So he came up with Raggedy Andy and raised the story Raggedy Andy Stories, which was just as successful. Now, Raggedy Ann and Andy are not really toys that I hear talked about a lot in toy collector circles, although there are definitely Raggedy Ann and Andy collectors out there. A lot of people still decorate their children's rooms, obviously, usually toddlers or infants. It does happen, and some of the early dolls are worth quite a bit of money. But the reason I really look at this is they've stood the test of time, and Johnny Gruelle really did something that has lasted for over 100 years. And people have been asked over the years, where did he get this idea from? And there was never a specific answer given, but his friends and family closest to him, the story that was most believed, probably the most accurate to being true, was that when he was a child, he went up into his grandmother's attic and found a rag doll with no face. And taking a pen or a marker or whatever it was he had at the time, he drew a face on that doll, and that became Raggedy Ann. And all these years later, as an adult, he had the idea, wrote this book, and obviously that spurred into Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls and Raggedy Ann and Andy clothes and all kinds of different toys, board games, all these different things. And I have got this Raggedy Ann and Andy alarm clock. Now, it's not a toy, and it's actually not worth very much money. A lot, probably $5, $10. And a lot of toys in my collection are like this. There are some that are worth more, some that are fairly valuable, but I look for toys that have a sentimental value to me, toys that I have a connection to. And that's the case with this clock. I was out at Todd Farm last summer, walking around looking for toys and different things, and I looked over and saw this clock, and I said, oh geez, I remember that. My sister had that when she was a kid. And I remembered it used to always every morning say, out of bed, sleepyhead, out of bed, sleepyhead, and you'd pop up and get out of bed. So I grabbed it, and I called my sister thinking I'm going to give her back her alarm clock from her childhood. But when I called her, she said, I never had a Raggedy Ann and Andy clock. And I went, wait a minute, what? So I'm kind of racking my brain, and I realized, wait a minute, my sister didn't have that. I had it. And I was like, that's why I remember what it said so clearly. But why didn't I remember having this? And as I did a little research, it dawned on me. This was released by GNX Corporation in 1974. That means I was 3 years old. I wasn't probably even in preschool yet, definitely not in kindergarten yet. So the reality, this was the first alarm clock I ever owned in my life. Maybe I was starting preschool or whatever it was. My parents wanted me to start getting myself out of bed rather than them having to come in and wake me every morning. So they bought me this, and every morning I would wake up with out of bed, sleepyhead. So having it back in my collection it's a great thing. It's not the type of toy I normally get. Honestly, I'm not the hugest Raggedy Ann and Andy fan, but at 3 years old I was, and it brings a great memory back. So we're going to cut to commercial, and we'll be back with this month's guest.
What do you know? A bank that talks to you. It's the Raggedy Ann and Andy Talking Bank. When you drop a coin into Raggedy Andy
Don't listen to him. Give me your money.
or into Raggedy Ann, each one talks to you.
Don't give your money to Raggedy Andy. He spends all he gets on popcorn and candy.
Batteries not included.
I love talking to you.
Me too.
The Raggedy Ann and Andy Talking Bank accepts pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars. It's from Janix.
Hey, welcome back. Now, for those of you that are actually watching this show here in Ipswich, where we filmed the episode, this week's guest is no stranger to anyone in town. He's a big part of our community, but we're going to learn a different side of him today. Let's welcome this month's guest, Jon Stafford. All right. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jack. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and like I said, you're well known in this community. The reason being is that you're the school nurse at the elementary school at Winthrop.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so my children know you from that.
Yeah, everybody knows me in town, so I can't shop in town. I can't really, spend any time in town when I'm not working because there's kids everywhere who come
Oh,
up
and
to
the
me.
kids, I'm sure, come running up to you. And if they saw you in the costume, I'm sure that would just add.
I'm not sure that
things out.
anybody would think it was strange, to be honest with you, considering how I dress and act normally. I think they'd probably just be like, yeah, that's just how he is.
Got it. Yeah. But obviously we're talking this month about Doctor Who.
Doctor
we got
Who.
the TARDIS here, the time and relative dimensions in space. And
Yep.
Jon obviously is a dedicated Whovian.
My old girl, yeah.
Yes. Now, that's what I think is really cool, is that you built this.
Yes, I did. It's like all TARDISes, it's made of block transfer computations.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm kidding. I built it, I was living in an apartment here in Ipswich.
Yes.
It was a ground floor apartment that was fairly big, so I had some room.
Must have been, because this thing is tall.
Yeah, but I didn't have a workshop per se, so every time I had to, I would work on it, I had to set everything up, do my work, and then break it all down again and put everything away. So
Yes.
it ended up taking me about a year and a half to build it.
I can see why. That thing's huge. I
Yeah.
mean, people I don't know if you can really tell from the filming here, but I mean, this thing, we had to maneuver it in between the
Yeah.
lights of the studio here. It's so
And,
tall.
Yeah, she's about 8 feet tall with her tears. So she's the size of the TARDIS that Tom Baker and Peter Davison would have used.
The fourth and fifth Doctors.
Yep.
Now, there have been 13 Doctor Who's.
Yes. There have
The
been 13.
show originally started in 1963.
1963, the day after JFK was shot.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, the producer, a woman named Verity Lambert, seriously considered not airing the show because the nation was in mourning and Britain was sort of reacting the same way.
Sure, it is a BBC show. That's
Yep.
right. It's not in America even. But you mentioned the fourth and fifth. You actually did this to the dimensions.
Yeah, I did it to
those
the
two
dimensions.
doctors.
There is I got the plans from a website called Woodworking for Mere Mortals.
Okay.
And so it's designed to be broken down easily without really any tools, although I do sometimes use a hammer to knock things in place.
Yeah.
But each of these corners comes off, the walls come off, the doors come off, the tiers come off, and it breaks down so that you could put it in the back of a pickup truck or a minivan or something like that.
It's awesome. And the reason you picked this one is because you're dressed as Peter
Yes,
Davison,
I'm dressed
who
as
was
Peter
the
Davison.
fifth Doctor.
He was my doctor.
He was your doctor.
Yes.
Now-
just like David Tennant, who
Probably the most
famously
popular is Tennant. Yeah.
said to Peter Davison, well, there was a famous mini episode where Peter Davison and David Tennant met.
Okay, I actually
and so
missed that.
David
Okay.
and so David Tennant said to him, you were my doctor. You were the first one that I saw.
Gotcha.
Because Tennant and I are about the same age. So
Okay.
so Peter Davison was my first Doctor Who. And you always fall in love with your first Doctor Who.
Well, there's that, and also I know there's something you told me before. We were talking about cosplay in general, and you said the first thing you always do is find somebody you actually look like.
Right. So and so
so-
I bear a bit of a resemblance.
And that's
to,
why my
to
go-to
Peter Davison.
cosplay has become Fred Flintstone.
Nice.
Even with the beard, it still works. But yeah.
I like it.
So now it's been, like I said, there's been 13 doctors from going through the guys we've already mentioned, and now recently it's changed with Jodie Whittaker. We've got the first female doctor.
The first female doctor. I like her a lot.
Yeah, she seems to be
I
doing
think
very well.
I think she's terrific. Yeah, it's kind of shocking that it's taken them this long. Even when Tom Baker was getting ready to retire and they hired Peter Davison, he sort of hinted in the paper, Tom Baker, that it might be a woman.
I could see that.
And every time since then, it's been, Jesus, is it going to be a woman? And they've always kind of chickened out. So it's nice to see that they finally...
Rachel Sawyer, who was my first guest ever on Toy Talk, we were going to go to a Comic-Con together about 8 years ago, and that was something we were talking about costume ideas, and that was she was saying is maybe I'll be a female doctor.
Yeah.
And was like, we never did quite do that, but
And so they sort of set it up for you. The new series started in 2005, I think.
yes, it did. Yes, it was 63 to 89.
Yep.
They tried bringing it back a couple times. They tried an American version.
They tried a TV movie. It was Fox and BBC working jointly together produced a TV movie called Doctor Who. Paul McGann played the 8th Doctor. Sylvester McCoy was in it briefly to do a regeneration
Sylvester
scene.
McCoy was number 7, is that correct?
Yep, he was.
Now, I'd have to say, I mean, it's arguably, and probably beyond arguably, it's got to be the most popular BBC show that's ever come out.
I would think so.
Definitely the longest running.
Yeah, I can't off the, I mean, maybe Masterpiece Theater.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
but
I mean,
as far as broadness of audience and reach, I think.
As far as, so I was just going to say, crossing over to America, I can't say there's another BBC show that's ever caught the popularity.
No.
Now, there have been some they've crossed over and brought to America and redid them.
Right, exactly.
We mentioned Archie Bunker earlier, and that
The
was
Office.
based on The Office.
Right, lots of
Archie
those
Bunker, Three's Company also had come from a British show, and but still, it wasn't the British shows themselves that got the popularity here.
And of course, when I was a kid, you could only watch, back in the old days when I was, you could only watch Doctor Who on PBS.
Okay, I thought you were going to say the only English show you could see was Benny Hill.
No,
I was waiting for that.
Well, there was Benny Hill too. And for the longest time, the PBS station around here, the local Boston affiliate, all they had was Tom Baker.
Okay.
And so they would show all the Tom Bakers. He played the part for 7 years, so there were lots of episodes.
Sure.
And they would just keep showing Tom Baker, and when they got to the last one, they just go back to the first one again.
Wow.
And so I have a friend who was a big fan of Tom Baker.
Well, I would imagine he was all he saw.
He was all you saw. And so he watched them over and over, and then one day they had the next series. They had the Peter Davison episodes.
What's going on here?
So he regenerated, and my friend was like, what in the world is happening? And like so he said, I waited the whole next episode for him to change back to normal.
And that's what I wanted to talk about, regeneration, how we've had 13 doctors. They basically got to the point where William Hartnell.
William Hartnell had a lot of health trouble.
Yes.
I think he'd been smoking since he was like 9.
Oh, boy.
So he had a lot of lung trouble, and he was having trouble getting around. And the show was a little different then. He was not so much the action star. He was the
not
brains.
at all. He was very brainy.
He was the brains, and there was a younger
cerebral
male companion who was the guy who went out and punched people. But eventually, Bill Hartnell got too old and decrepit.
Sick,
and he just couldn't do it anymore.
But they didn't want to end the show. It was so popular.
Again, Verity Lambert sort of came together with their people and said, what are we going to do here? Are we going to find somebody who looks like Bill Hartnell and just sort of keep going that way and recast him? And someone had the brilliant idea of like, look, he's an alien. Maybe he just changes.
Just changes.
Yeah.
And that the regeneration, I mean, he was he's a Time Lord from, is it Gallifrey is how they pronounce
Gallifrey,
it?
yes.
Gallifrey. And I mean, why not? Let him change. He just changes into somebody else.
Yeah, he just changes into, So yeah, when the new series sort of primed us for the idea that there may be a woman who, when they started showing us other Time Lords who would regenerate into another sex.
Yeah.
And so that's where you started to get the idea that, oh, okay, and so and then they did it with the Master.
Now that's something they never did before, because I know like there's been a lot of like changes actually over the series as to what exactly happened to Gallifrey, how he ended up with the TARDIS. At one point, I think they had said the planets had been destroyed.
Yeah.
Others he had escaped.
Yep. When the show first started, we didn't hear the name Gallifrey. We didn't hear that until the second Doctor.
Okay.
But we knew that the first Doctor was a renegade from this planet of Time Lords who were these, very, very advanced beings.
Yeah.
In Patrick Troughton's day, he was the second Doctor.
Okay.
That's when they established a little more of the backstory about the Time Lords.
Sure.
That's when you got the name of the planet Gallifrey, and that's where you got the explanation of regeneration.
Okay.
And
they had to explain it. Yeah.
And then I don't think they set up the idea that you only had 12 regenerations until Jon Pertwee.
I actually didn't realize there was a limit of 12. Okay,
so
we're on to 13 here. So.
Well, so there would be 13 Doctors because you get 12 regenerations. So you're born, and then you have 12
if she
regenerations.
steps out,
So
we're in a problem here.
Well, except that, so in the continuity of the show, Matt Smith was the last regeneration of that Doctor.
Oh, okay.
And the Time Lords granted him another 12.
Oh, okay. So
now he started over again. Yeah.
What exactly was the storyline with the War Doctor?
So the War Doctor was there was a great time war between the Time Lords and the Daleks, who are their
the little kind of metallic enemies. Yeah.
Right. And this time war was fought across time and space, and neither side was able to gain the upper hand. And so finally, the Doctor realized that what was needed was a warrior.
Okay.
And so he became the War Doctor.
The War Doctor.
Yeah.
And that just lasted for, what was it, 2 episodes? That's pretty much that series.
He really only appears in 1 episode, which is a special. He does appear in a little mini 6-minute episode to show Paul McGann regenerating.
See, and that's where I think I saw him. Okay, that's what I remember him from. I don't so much remember the War Doctor episode, but I did remember that. I remember the name, but I wasn't quite placing what the thing was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, honestly, I don't place it as well. Like I said, I had to do some Googling. I've always been a fan of Doctor Who. I watch Doctor Who, but it's kind of like, for me, it's almost like Star Trek. It's like, when I sit down and watch it, I get really into it. I mean, I enjoy it. But then once I stop watching it I kind of forget about it for a while, and then kind of come back to it.
I mean, it's definitely sort of the British Star Trek.
Oh, it definitely is,
it's a little campy. In the original series, the special effects were kind of wonky, but that was sort of
well,
part
that's
of the charm.
60,
that was kind of part of it.
Charm,
It was shot on video in a day when nothing was shot on video, so it had that kind of weird video look that we weren't used to
it definitely
yet.
looks a little, I don't know if pale would be the right way to put it when you see the original episodes.
In some of the old episodes, the TARDIS console is actually light green. The reason for that was that the first two, the Bill Hartnell and the Patrick Troughton episodes, were filmed in black and white. And in black and white, pale green looks whiter than white.
Okay.
So that's why it's painted pale green. When they went to color, they never bothered to correct it. So
a lot of things were different with black and white. I mean, I remember reading that Superman, the Adventures of Superman TV show, he had a brown suit because it made it look more
because
blue
it looked
in
better
the black
on
and white.
Yeah, exactly. On the original Star Trek, the yellow shirts that the Captain Kirk wears, they're not yellow. They're actually light green.
Oh, really? Okay.
But they just look yellow under the lights.
So, and we know that in the studio. It can change a lot of things. And I mean, people see all these things that they put up behind us. All we have behind us is a green curtain.
There's literally nothing there. Right. There's just a green curtain. Yeah.
I mean, Doctor Who has just been, it seems like it's gotten more popular over the years. Your shows tend to
and it has
get less, it just has increased.
It has a good message. And maybe it's a little corny sometimes, but the show was originally intended for children.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's sort of branched out since then, but it's still meant for sort of young adults and people who like science fiction.
More young. Definitely a sci-fi nerd, kind of show.
And the Doctor's a guy who he doesn't solve problems by shooting people or punching people.
No.
He uses brains. Yes, sometimes he has to resort to a little
physical violence, but he always tries to figure things out.
Very rarely. Yeah. One of the lines that's repeated over and over in the show, whenever he meets somebody who says, "I'm nobody important," he'll always come back with "everybody's somebody important."
Everybody is,
and that's a good message to send, I think. Yeah.
Everybody has something to contribute to this world, no matter what your background was, your upbringing. And you just have something to contribute.
And that's what I like about the show is that's the message that it sends to people, and it's especially important with the old show when I was a kid. For those kids who were a little nerdy, who liked science fiction, who liked Star Wars and comic books. Well, we didn't have the internet, so there was no way to have this community that we have now.
So PBS,
so you felt like an outcast.
Yeah, but it's a great show. It's a phenomenon. It's just going. I know you go around to Comic Cons.
I do. I've been to a few Comic Cons, so there are lots and lots
of photos inside the TARDIS.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, if who knows? Maybe somebody's watching who actually has my picture in their house. I don't know.
They might, or there might even be somebody that wants to contact him. We could probably put up some information about having you be able to set up at Comic Cons.
Yeah, that's true.
You open this up, people take pictures in the TARDIS. It's
we have kids go in and kind of poke their heads out and wave and stuff.
And so it's fun for everybody, man.
Yep.
But John, it's great having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
And everybody out there, we'll see you again next month on Toy Talk.
Yabba dabba doo.